Jeremiah?
Thinking about what we sacrifice for and how we can sacrifice that for Jesus and how he gets to decide if we do it or not.
Yeah, that's good.
The role of people in ministry is to teach people how to pray and to teach them how to rely on God for themselves.
Amen. That's good. Shri?
Overfill, wait, prompted for.
Wait, say it again.
Overfill, wait, prompted for.
Okay, yeah. Peter?
If Jesus is really who he says he is, why does it even make sense to delay in inviting someone to study him?
Yeah. That's good. Anyone else? Yeah?
Know where the plane is going, because I didn't usually know where the plane was going when I was in other people's resorts.
Well, and I think maybe some of the lesson in that too is that we are imperfect and we're not expected to know everything that there is to be a Corfa, and it can be really intimidating to be in a room and be leading a discussion. And so I think a lot of that just takes practice and intentionality, but it frees us up to not feel like we have to be perfect, which I don't know about y'all, but that's very helpful for me. There was somebody else over here. Oh, Renee. Power is made perfect in weakness. Amen. Kai, and then last Felipe.
It's not about our abilities and our capabilities, it's just about God working through us.
Yeah?
I don't know why this was stuck with me, but it was be personal.
Be personal. Be
personal.
Okay. All right. Well, that's awesome. We just have a couple talks left. So let's try and stick with it. There's more snacks in the back. So if at any point you need to stand up, go get a snack, come back, or go to the bathroom, or just stand in the back with your notebook or anything like that, feel free to do that, whatever you need to do to keep paying attention. But I have a video and it's not working yet. So I think we can just be done. Yeah, I think we just give up. That we gave it a good old try. We gave it a good try. It's all good, but I do need this pulled up for my slides. Potentially. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Yay, it works. Okay, so I don't know if you guys that were at Mission Countdown remember the little clip that we listened to from the podcast about questions and communicating. If you weren't there, don't worry, because I'm going to give just a little overview and some of the highlights from what we listened to, but also from the rest of the podcast. I listened to all of it. It was 45 minutes. It was very good and helpful. So if you like listening to podcasts on commutes or anything like that, I can send it in the Corfa chat later. But I'm just going to talk more about questions and asking people questions and why we don't ask people questions and all the things that can kind of get in the way of that. So yeah, like I said, Brandon introduced this podcast. The host is interviewing a guy named Charles Duhigg, and he is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, and he's an author. He just wrote a book on super communicators and communicating with good questions. And so he's done a lot of research, and so that's the material that I'll kind of be pulling from. But I'm also going to try and share some stories, make it more personal, and then maybe also integrate some axioms. So I'll try and keep us on pace with whose words I'm saying in the moment, because it can get a little bit confusing. But yeah, some of my background, I went to UTD many, many moons ago. I graduated in 2019. But, okay, whoever whistled, that was really rude. That's like that video that I don't remember, but Kevin Hart makes a comment about how old that guy is. Yeah, that's how that moment felt just now. But yeah, so originally I went to Collin College, and I went for 2 years, and then I transferred here to UTD. And coming into UTD, I wouldn't say that I was super quiet, but I was very private and very closed off. And I probably wouldn't have told you that. That's what everybody else would say. I would have thought that was so insulting. But yeah, looking back, like they're definitely right, and it was all true. But yeah, Mandy was my peer team leader all those years ago, and she is just still one of the best people that I know that asks good questions and seeks to get to know you. And so thankfully, over time, I have opened up more and more, and I am less of a private person. I've also probably developed a better ability to ask questions and take an interest in people. Maybe some of that was to divert attention away from myself. Like if I just ask a lot of questions that I don't have to, talk about myself. But however, I've gotten here, the moral of the story is that it can take a long time. If we're not super great at asking questions or being inquisitive of people, a lot of this stuff is not stuff that probably happens overnight. Like, oh, I can just switch my brain into this mindset and be a super communicator. That's probably not going to happen. But I think that all of us have to have a commitment to growth and to getting better at this. Because you are going to be spending a lot of time with people as a Corfa, whether that's FOJ or in core or just hanging out with people outside of core or hanging out with classmates or hanging out with your family, or if you want to date somebody and get married or have kids. Like our whole lives, revolve around people and community. They revolve around God, but we also get to experience that within community. And so hopefully this is something that you guys are excited about and want to grow in. So, you may or may not remember some of these points, but I'm just going to go through some of the ones that I flagged as helpful. The first one that he said is that the most persuasive people don't argue their point, they ask good questions. The most persuasive people don't argue their point, they ask good questions. And I have noticed this in ministry. Number one, we're not trying to move people onto our agenda. We're moving people onto God's agenda. We're trying to shepherd and facilitate people closer to Jesus and not make disciples of ourselves, but make disciples of Him. And so often, if I come into a conversation and somebody's talking about something that's hard in their life, and I just come in with advice and what I think that they should do, number one, I'm probably going to be coming in with assumptions and biases. And I may not have even considered what God would say about their situation. I'm just coming in with what I think on the fly. And then that's probably going to make the other person feel pretty unheard. And like maybe you don't care to listen, but you just want to fix them. And that's never how we want to come across. But if I ask a lot of questions, often I come to a better understanding of the situation. And then the person that I'm talking to can come to a conclusion on their own just by me asking good questions and getting them to really think about it. And then what's funny is I think they're also more bought into that when they decide it, and it's not just you telling them what to do, right? We don't want to teach people what to think, but how to think, right? So that's how I've kind of seen that play out. The host makes a point that we all have the ability to be super communicators. People that are just very, very good at communicating. But some people, it may just come more naturally. Have you ever met somebody, or you are the person that can just talk to a wall? You're a yapper, or those people that can do that? Yeah, it's definitely not Layla. But yeah, so the number one behavior that researchers found that separated super communicators from average communicators was that super communicators asked 10 to 20 times more questions than the average communicator. 10 to 20 times more questions is what separated them, from just being what he considers an average communicator. And some of those questions may not even register as questions, but they're just invitations for people to share. So it's like when somebody's like, oh yeah, I just have a lot going on right now. And you could just say, well, tell me about that. That's asking them or inviting them to keep talking about that, or to engage with that. And that seems pretty subtle, but I feel like I've been in a lot of conversations where it seems like somebody does want to talk about something, but we may just make an assumption that they don't, or that will make them uncomfortable. And so we just try and move on, or we bring it back to our own experience instead of continuing to ask questions to somebody else. Does that make sense? Have y'all experienced that? So yeah, the questions that we want to be going for are what he defines as deep questions, okay? So write this down. A deep question is one that asks about values, experiences, or beliefs. This is how he defines a deep question. So for example, an example that he gives is, instead of asking, how was your day? How often, if you only have like 10 seconds to talk to somebody, you walk up to them and you're like, oh, hey, like, how's your day?
Good. How about you?
It's good. Okay, bye. Like, it just kind of puts us into autopilot if you just ask somebody, how was your day? And how am I supposed to answer that if I'm not having a good day?
Good.
I just most often say, it's good, how's yours? And then we, continue in our interaction. So instead, he gives a suggestion to ask, what's been your favorite part of the day so far? So that is asking somebody to reflect on their day, but you're more so engaging maybe how they feel about their day so far, by asking them what their favorite part has been. So that's just one of the examples that he gives. I was kind of thinking about, instead of like, what classes are you taking? That's just like asking for information. Or I could say, how have you been feeling about your class load? Like, what's on your plate? So you see how it's like a similar topic, but the question just switches to, I think, being more engaging and engaging, values, experiences, or beliefs. So those are the kinds of questions that we want to go for. But I think most people feel anxious about asking questions in general, or asking deep questions, because they don't want to be too much, or, we have a lot of different things. So I just wanted to crowdsource from you guys, what keeps us from asking questions in general, or going deeper with those deep questions? Like, what are things that keep us from doing that?
Thinking about yourself too much.
Okay.
Not actually about the other person, and an opportunity to engage with them or bless them.
Yeah, sure. Just shout it out.
You're kind of like gauging the quality of the question, or would you strike them? This is the best question I've ever heard.
Yeah, again, kind of thinking about ourselves too much, like, oh, well, I have to ask the perfect question, or like one that's, what is a deep question? Like, what if I don't, we start to kind of overanalyze, which is, again, making it about how we come across instead of the other person and how it could bless them. Yeah.
I'm wondering if I'll come off as insensitive asking about certain things.
Yeah. Yeah, so kind of fearing that we may be insensitive. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Disinterest?
Yeah, we're just not interested. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, worried about the other person's reaction a lot.
Just like saying their no for them, once again, thinking into ourselves and knowing, get them out, just express how they feel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
A lot of times.
No, go ahead. You're good.
A lot of times it's easier to just stay surface level, and my brain doesn't even need to be in the conversation. So I'm at one of our week events. I'm like, yeah, it's easier to talk about the shows we've been watching instead of actual personal stuff, because my brain doesn't work enough to in the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the other examples that I was looking at is, instead of being like, so what movies and shows are you watching? It's like, what is a character from a movie or a TV show that you've watched recently that you relate with? So you're going to get insight into maybe what they've watched, but you're also going to engage with them at that deeper level. Yeah, there's plenty more. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep going. But yeah, some of them that I said is just fear of rejection, somebody just not wanting to engage you in that way. It feels awkward, and I don't want to feel awkward and not know what to say or make somebody else feel awkward. Laziness and autopilot, it's just easier to kind of stick with what you know and not go on that deeper level. And then you just don't know what to ask, or you don't know how to get there. So those are all things that I was thinking too. But yeah, another point that he made is just often we don't have a resistance to deep questions. We have a resistance to deep questions that move too quickly. So it's not that people are actually resistant to deep questions themselves. It's just at the rate at which it feels like it's happening in the conversation. But he makes a point that you can move fast if you ramp up the intimacy. So if you spend time with this person and you're engaging and they may give you a little invitation to say something, you can go there asking a deep question if you are going to maybe spend more time with them and you're going to see them consistently. So it may feel weird to do in just a one-off conversation in an airport, that you're not going to really have a relationship with this person. But a lot of the people we're going to interact with this year are people in our cores and people that we're going to see pretty consistently. So yeah, just a note here, a lot of this doesn't just happen on accident. It's very purposeful and intentional. Often the people that this comes easily to or seems like it comes easy to, they've actually practiced for a long time being in this mindset, or they've actually prepped to take you somewhere with the questions they're asking, and it just doesn't seem like that. So yeah, again, Mandy's one of the best people at this. I remember like years into being friends with her and her asking me a lot of questions, I was just like, man, I feel like we just have a casual conversation and she's like, oh no, like these are the things I've thought through, and like these are the things that I want to ask you. Here's where I want to go. So here's the questions that I want to ask to get there. And I'm like, whoa, like that's a lot. But because it just comes so naturally, I'm like, oh, then I can just show up to a conversation and it'll just come naturally to me, right? But no, because, she's had a lot of experience asking people questions and relating to them. And so if this is something that we want to grow in, I would encourage you, like we talked about earlier, to take a lot more notes. A lot more notes on people and what you should say and that kind of stuff. As people are telling you things, maybe after you get out of a one-on-one, write some of the things down that they told you. So then the next time you meet with them, you can ask them more questions about the things that they said. So yeah, just that there's a lot more purpose behind this than normal. Yeah.
I think one of the things that's helped me a lot over the years is we talk about getting advice a lot, that I would go to my mentors after a conversation, especially when someone said something to me that I'd never heard before. Be like, oh yeah, I have this, and then I'm like, what would you do or what would you say? And what was always interesting to me is what questions those older people asked. Well, have they done this? Have they tried? And I'm like, I don't know. But it's like I'm learning what kinds of questions, how they're thinking through that, where their mind goes next.
Yeah.
And those are the things I'm kind of writing down. And then when I go back and actually ask all of those questions, I'm starting to build my muscle memory of like, I've asked that question now. It's one of my questions now. It's not just something I heard about. It's like, yeah, that would have been cool to ask. All right, next, Yeah. So I think really using your mentors and not thinking because I missed an opportunity to ask a question, I can never ask that question. I can just get back it often into it's like I've been thinking a lot about what you shared with me last week, and I was wondering this. I have this question. People are. It's kind of this. They don't have resistance to deep questions. I'm not moving too quickly if they've already brought it up to me, and I've waited a week. You know, and it just shows people are honestly more weirded out. And I've seen this in my own life when I share something really deep with someone, and they never mention it again. And I'm kind of like, did I make up that conversation? Do they know? Did they care? Were they actually interested, or did I make that? It's hard to bring something up like that twice. But as someone who they've shared with me, I bring it back up in a really gracious, way that opens the door. Then it's kind of like, all right, now this is a free conversation between us. We could talk about it again if either one of us wanted to. So
yeah, that's a great point. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving us forward. So he then talks about these 3 conversation buckets that each conversation belongs in. And so there's the practical, the emotional, and the social. So practical is just going to be plans and kind of like just general information. Emotional is going to be more based on feelings and emotions. And then social is going to be relating to each other and society. And so an example of this, Johnny and I recently, Johnny is my husband, and we were talking about going on vacation. And it was kind of coming at a time that we were kind of in a harder personal season, just dealing with some family stuff. And and had been experiencing some difficulties. So we just wanted to go on a vacation to connect and have something to look forward to. And we're both excited about it. But then we had some bills come up that were more unexpected. And so Johnny was talking about the finances of it and just being concerned, like, well, can we afford this? And like, is this the right time? And, you know, all of that kind of stuff, which are all very valid. But I was saying things like, I just feel like I really need this trip, like emotionally, you know? But then he would just talk about, well, how much is each thing going to be? And like, I just don't think it makes sense. And then I'm going back to being like, are you listening to me? Like, do you hear what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I really need this trip, you know, to connect. Like, a lot of this stuff has just been really taking a toll on me. And so we're going back and forth. So in this example, we started out having the same conversation, but it shifted to where Johnny is having a practical conversation and I am having an emotional conversation, right? Johnny is, you know, looking at the practical, you know, what is everything going to cost? And do we have, you know, the time and the money and all of that kind of stuff. But I was looking at the emotional value of the trip and wanting him to acknowledge my emotions and how hard, you know, this season has been for me. But he was kind of locked into the practical nature of it. And so we just weren't having the same conversation. So we really couldn't connect or come to an even footing. So does that make sense, like the difference between those two things? So yeah, every type of conversation is equally legitimate, but the key is figuring out and paying attention to if you and somebody else are having the same type of conversation in the same moment to feel connection. If you're not, you may not be able to hear each other. You may be listening, but you may be not able to hear each other. There's a difference in those two. Have you guys ever said, you're not listening to me? Or, you know, maybe you didn't say it, but you were thinking it, you know, when you're talking to somebody else, like your parents, and you're like, I can't talk back to you, but you don't understand me, you know? So yeah, I can, you know, repeat back what you said, like, you know, I'm listening, but I'm not in the same mindset, and so I'm not actually hearing what you're saying, especially if we're not in the same, you know, bucket. So one of the things that he says that I thought was pretty powerful was, even if your words don't agree, you'll feel more connected if you're in the same bucket. So even if your words don't agree, you'll feel more connected if you're in the same bucket. So his example was talking about politics. Maybe you're talking with somebody and you're voting in an election, and person A says, I'm voting because I have a lot of crime in my area and I feel unsafe. And then person B responds with, well, the crime rate is actually down in this area. Okay? But that's not in the same emotional conversation that person A's was. They said that they were feeling unsafe. And so then I don't necessarily agree, or person B doesn't. And so it's like, well, here's the facts. They're having a practical conversation, but person A was trying to open up an emotional conversation about how they were feeling. And so instead, he suggests that you empathize with, yeah, I feel that fear. Like, I know what that's like. My solution may be different from yours, but I have felt that at some point in my life. So instead of feeling, you know, your words are disagreeing because you don't agree on the solution, but you're acknowledging how that person's feeling, and so you can still connect even though you don't agree. Does that make sense? So yeah, I thought that was really helpful. So to sum up some of this, the host asks this guy, Jonathan, what some habits are that you can work towards to improve your communication. Coincidentally, these habits coincide with one of our axioms. So I'm going to take us now to the axiom, which is seek first to understand and then to be understood. It's number 4 in your book. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. So as we've been talking about, from the very beginning, it's important to start relationships and important conversations with questions and attentive listening and hearing. A lot of the times, yeah, like I was talking about earlier, we bring in assumptions or feelings, and so we may just start talking about something. But we're seeking to be understood. We're not seeking first to understand where this other person is coming from. And so, yeah, make sure you understand before you speak. If you don't, and even if you feel like you understand, it may be beneficial to just ask more questions anyway and really make sure that you understand what this person is saying or where they're coming from. Some studies have indicated that it can take an average of 7 questions in a row to achieve understanding. 7 questions. We often ask one and then we just start talking. Or you've been in a conversation that's felt like that, and then that person's not really understanding where you're coming from. And yeah, in James 1:19, he says, everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak. Quick to listen and slow to speak. You've probably heard you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So listen before you speak. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. So yeah, going back to some of these habits from the podcast that we should build. Number 1, ask deep questions. Deep questions goes back to the definition from earlier. If you practice it, you'll get to the point where you do it without thinking about it, but it doesn't come naturally. And so prep and be prepared for that. Depending on what kind of communicator you are, there could be a sneaking suspicion that someone isn't actually listening and they're just waiting on their turn to speak. Have you ever been in those conversations where you're talking and talking and then it's like, well, yeah, I just think that blah, 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 and they start talking, okay? We've all probably been that person before, and that's happened to us. And this is especially with disagreements or conflict, where emotions are kind of high. And so one thing that he suggests is called looping for understanding. Okay, it's called looping for understanding. So step 1 is to ask a question. Okay, that's the first step in any, conversation, ask a question. The second step is to listen or hear and then repeat back in your own words what you heard them say. So that could be, so what I hear you saying is blank, and you repeat what you understood. That way, if you're not on the same page, right then and there, you can clarify, some things or where you're coming from. The goal is not mimicry. It's proving that I'm listening and processing what you're saying, okay? Then step 3, which he argues is the hardest one and the one that we often don't do, is to ask if I got it right when I repeat it back. So then, you would say, did I understand that correctly? Okay, so all of this is just an attempt to make sure that you're really thorough in understanding where somebody may be coming from. Sometimes we make the mistake and we just start talking about ourselves, and that could come from wanting to relate. We have a story that kind of goes with that, and so we jump in and try and do that, but we may do that prematurely without making this person feel like we've actually heard them and know where they're coming from. There are times, he says, that looping for understanding does call us to share about ourselves. But that should be because you're showing the other person you want to connect, as opposing to just stealing the spotlight from them to talk about yourself. So someone could say, my aunt died last week, and so I'm really struggling because I was really close with her. And then we might say, oh yeah, I know how that feels. My dog died 7 years ago, and that really affected me also, which is, can be true. Even though you may be trying to relate, it probably won't feel like you're trying to actually connect with that person. So a better way that he argues to do this would be to say in response, I'm really close to my aunt too, and she's really important to me, but tell me about your aunt. What was she like? What are some of your best memories with her? So again, we're acknowledging and we're relating, but we're asking another question to keep, communicating with this person and kind of meet them where they are in an emotional conversation. So one of the last takeaways, is to just pay a lot more attention to what kind of conversation you're having. Be aware of that in your conversations. Don't just get stuck on autopilot. But be processing and thinking through and seeing if they're giving you any invitations, that you can take to ask them a deeper question or to further your understanding. And then the second thing is to just open yourself up to deeper connection with people. Sometimes some of this is just because we don't want to be vulnerable about our stories, and so we won't go there with people. But one of the things that he talks about in this podcast, he references a study from the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And so he was saying that they study people for like 60, 70 years in these studies. And the question that they studied was, what are the things earlier in life that make you happier, healthier, and more successful at age 65? Okay? So they did a long-term study on people's lives, and the only thing that they found that consistently made you happier, healthier, and more successful at age 65 and beyond was if that person had a handful of close relationships by the age of 45. So I'm going to say that again because I know it's kind of a lot of numbers. The only thing that they found consistently that made you happier, healthier, and more successful from age 65 and beyond was if those people had a handful of close relationships by the age of 45. And they found that in this study, it showed that people lived up to 7 years longer, that people were exposed to more opportunities, which goes hand in hand with success, and they were just happier because they had close relationships and people that knew them and that they interacted with on this level. And so if we're going to ask these people to interact with us in this way, we have to open our hearts up to do that. And that should just come from Jesus doing that with us. You know, we should have a genuine curiosity about people because they're made in God's image and we're made in God's image. And so we just get to spend time with people and get to know them and be curious about them. And a lot of asking good questions is just simply coming from a curiosity of the people that you're meeting with. So just for sake of time, we don't have a ton of time for me to go through some of the rest of these questions. But a few years ago, we had a TED Talk. I was going to show the clip, but it didn't work. But basically, there was a lady, and she just talks about these things called dopamine questions. And they're questions that verbally spike dopamine. They did a bunch of studies and researched it, and basically her argument is that when we get on autopilot and we ask the same questions, that's not actually engaging any part of our brain to experience pleasure or like enjoy it at all. But just by changing the type of question that you ask, you can actually verbally trigger dopamine release in the brain and engage with people at a deeper level. And so these are some examples of dopamine questions that you could ask people, and I'll share these or you can take a picture of the slide. But yeah, some of these are, what do you love most about your major? Instead of just asking, what's your major? Maybe ask them, what do you love most about your major? You'll probably figure out what their major is from that. But why did they choose it? What do they love about it? Do you have any side hustles or passion projects? You can get to know a lot of weird, quirky things about people by their side hustles and their passion projects. And it also is going to trigger them being excited about something in their life. And she had this really cool comment. She said it's bringing excitement from other parts of their life into the current conversation. And that was really, exciting for people. Another question that the podcast talked about that's not on here was, do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard? Do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard? Sometimes if I assume that you want to be helped, I'm going to just jump in with advice, but sometimes people just might need to be heard and acknowledged, like, yeah, that's really rough. I'm so sorry you're experiencing that. Or they might need a hug after a long day. They don't want your advice. They just want a hug from you. Or they may want some help thinking through a solution. But I just thought that was kind of, I don't know if you really want to ask people that, but with different people or your close friends, it could be helpful to gauge, where they're at. So yeah, applying this practically as you meet with people that you've gotten numbers for or that are coming to your core, it all starts with a genuine curiosity and interest and love in the people that you're talking to. So ask God for a spirit of curiosity. And then view these new people that you're meeting with as people you truly want to get to know, people that are made in the image of Christ and that are in need of a Savior. When you look at people that way, it's a reminder to avoid autopilot and to be really purposeful and intentional with your questions and with your communication. There's so much that you don't know about even freshmen. They've lived 18 years of life. and you don't know anything. So there's so many things, even if it feels like you've run out of questions, there are so many more that you could ask and so many more aspects of their life that you could engage with if you're curious and you make a point to go there. And you can also practice this with your COFA and your CORFA coach, like as you do these pre-year evals and getting to know each other. You know, it's really kind of weird when I show up having my pre-year eval done. I haven't done any with my girls yet, so I'm not outing any of them currently. And I show up and I've written my stuff down and I'm like, all right, like, do you guys have any questions? And they're like, no. Like, you covered it. And I'm like, really? Like, even if I write a whole paragraph, you know, about these things, like, you don't think there's anything else you could ask about or be curious about? And how do you think that that makes me feel, or your COFA feel, or even you feel? So that's just like a little personal encouragement. And I think it's a good place to practice it in your 2-on-1s this coming week when you do that. Like, maybe don't wait to read it until you show up to 2-on-1. Maybe read it beforehand and write down some questions that you want to ask, some of these deep questions based on this definition that I've given, and just see what that does in your relationships with, you know, these people you're going to spend, I don't know, a lot of days with every week for a whole year. So that's just a practical thing. But I am so proud of you guys and so impressed with how you just have simply asked the question for people to come to the Grove or to go to CORE, or like all of those questions obviously maybe don't seem like deep questions, but you need to ask the question if they want to come to CORE, if they want to study FOJ. And last night's attendance is proof that you guys are willing to be bold and to ask the question and to get people there. So this is just taking the next step as you start to meet with people one-on-one and become friends with them and really invest in them, how to kind of take this deeper. But I know for a fact that you guys are going to do it because you've already been doing it, inviting people to events and just doing that. And so we're so proud of you. And I believe, you know, a lot of my best friendships have come from people in this ministry that do just take an interest in my life. And so I have no doubt that you guys can make some of the best friends you've had just by being intentional with your questions and opening yourself up to that. Yeah? Okay, awesome. So now Peter is going to come, I think. Are you next? Oh, or wait, what's next? Do we know? Lightning round? I just don't have the schedule in front of me.